Welcome, investigator. Evil is on the rise. Crime is escalating. Our mission is to eliminate the crime by exposing evil, examine why it manifests, and highlight the brave souls that confront it every day. Join us as we work together to bring justice to every victim. Welcome to All Things Crime. Here's your host, Jared Bradley.
Yeah, I'm working with a DA. Yeah.
Okay, they have this case. And those are, it's a small group, just like detectives. Who wants who to work on a certain case?
Mm-hmm.
What DA you want in a certain trial? That was
they know detectives too. They know, like, I'll go to trial with Tom Smith because he's great on the stand. He brings good evidence. He makes great reports. I'll go to trial with him. And there's some people that they're like a little less apt to go to trial with, and they'll tell you that. They'll admit it. They're like, well, this guy, he's not so great on the stand. I've had some issues in the past. They're careful. They don't want to waste the state's money going up with a case that might fall apart because of some hole. But also, one of the things that Tom and I have talked about this, once you get enough experience testifying, and when you work as many cases and many arrests we made throughout our careers, you get pretty comfortable in a courtroom. And you learn how to do this. Listen to the question, turn to the jury, find one or two people who are going to catch your eyes and speak directly to them. And before long, they're all nodding. Yep. And defense attorneys hate that. They'll walk over to the other side of the courtroom and try to get you to pay attention to them. And I'll be like, okay, I got a swivel chair. I heard your question. I'm turning, I'm facing the jury, and I'm answering. And when you answer plain, honest, you nod your head, or you make expressions. Yeah, we screwed that up. Yeah. And you can see them go, When you do that, you've got the jury. The jury thinks you're credible. When you admit a mistake, say, screw that up. That was not a good, this is what happened. Defense attorneys hate that because they want you to just act like you never make a mistake.
One of the best stories, real quick, again, with my dad, who did it all in the NYPD in the 50s, 60s, and 70s when New York was out of control. I had a case one time that we locked this kid up with a actual Uzi with armor piercing rounds in it. Foot chase, locked him up, got him, and now the trial. And the defense attorney was a major pain. His name was Rudy King. I'll never forget him. He would just go off on tangents and yell, and he was a pain to deal with. And I remember I was going on the stand the next day, and I was telling my dad, who I talked to all the time about everything when I was on the job and he was alive. And he goes, oh, what's he like? So I would tell him, he goes, okay, you want to know how to deal with him? I'm like, yeah, tell me. He goes, when you're sitting up on the stand, ask him to repeat every question he asks you.
Yes.
I go, what? He goes, everything he asks you. You don't understand it, and can you repeat it? I said, okay, you got it. So the next day, I'm up on the stand, and he's yelling about something, and I just calmly looked at him and went, can you repeat that question? And he would lose track of the question. He didn't even remember the question. And he withdrawn and come up with something else. And I go, I can't hear you. Can you repeat that? And I drove this guy bananas for almost 3 days. And we ended up, convicted him, and he went away for a long time, but, that's just part of it. When, like Dan said, when you get the experience, testifying's fun. You can have a good time testifying, especially if you're confident, if you know you did everything right, or even Dan said, if it comes up that something went wrong, you admit it. You're a human being, and juries like that. Juries don't like robots.
Right.
They like, humans like, hey, we goofed that up. We should have wrote this. We didn't do this. We didn't cover it, whatever. And the truth's always going to be better, because once you slip, you're done. You're not going to be able to get back on track if you make something up or embellish about something or whatever.
Yeah.
So
especially
another
if the
thing
defense
is
actually catches on to that. Then they're going to just exploit it. But
so defense attorneys have their tactics, right? One of them is yelling. They try to get you upset. They want to get you emotional. They want to get you defensive. They want you to go back and forth with them really quick, all this stuff. And you have to learn to be patient. And I had a defense attorney one time who was screaming at me from like 5 feet away, trying to get me to be upset. And I just sat there, and at one point I just turned, I looked at the judge, and I said, Your Honor, I apologize. I have a hearing condition where when somebody yells, all I hear is static. I'm sorry, I can't understand the counselor's questions. The judge looked at him and said, Counselor, speak in a normal tone, please. Destroyed him. took the knees out from him. He had nowhere to go. That was his whole strategy, get me upset. And I just stayed calm, and I appealed to the judge, and the judge wants order in their courtroom. They certainly don't want going to record as being somebody who is antagonistic towards a witness, because that's grounds for an appeal. And none of them want their cases on appeal or overturned on appeal. So I just sat there calmly.
Well, everybody's got their interrogation tactics, and defense attorneys and prosecutors for that matter, just like detectives. You all have a way of extracting information that you want.
Yep.
And
you know what, Jared, the good defense attorneys at the end of the day, Dan, you had this happen to you, would come up to you outside the courtroom, go, "Hey, detective, great job. Good job." They know it's a game. They know it's nothing personal. It has nothing to do with personalities. It's a game. And I had numerous, defense attorneys like walk up, you pat you on the back, go, "Hey, that was good. Good job. I'll see you again soon."
So you suck, but you ruined my case. But
well, if we believe in America and we believe in the right to counsel and we believe in all that stuff, which we believe fervently, we swear to defend the Constitution, and that includes the rights of the accused, because we could be accused one day too. So you have a right to a robust, vigorous defense, and I have no problem explaining my actions and explaining my words that I've written and evidence. None of it. Just when you cross the line and start getting personal and get snippy and yelling and crazy and start theatrics and tactics, then it's time to show you what a calm professional can do.
Right.
And that's what the goal is as a cop, is to be a calm professional, deal in facts, don't let them suck you into emotion.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting, as you guys are just describing that, I was thinking there's another defense attorney that I met on LinkedIn that I interviewed. Geez, it's been a long time ago, but the one thing that he said out of that entire discussion that we had was, he said, as a defense attorney, because there's also that TV version of defense attorneys that they're these scumbags that all they want to do is get the bad guy to be able to walk free. And he said, I don't view things that way. I view things as, it's my job to make sure that the judge and the prosecution, which would include obviously the investigators, so you guys, he said, my job is to make sure that the judge and the prosecution are doing their job. And as long as I do that to the best of my ability, then I don't, the client and the defendant, none of that really matters. He said, but he said, if the case is locked tight and the investigators and the prosecution and the judge, the court actually does their job, then his client will be convicted. And he said, that's getting the defendant off isn't my job. It's just my job is to make sure that everybody gets the fair trial. Yeah. So, and that's, I can live with that. And I think that, again, is, like you said, Dan, if I ever get accused of something, especially if I didn't do it, then, I want the type of defense that is going to be as robust as absolutely possible. So, there's, I think our entire justice system hinges on that. And when one part of that, regardless of which side of it, breaks down, then our justice system doesn't work. But when all the pieces are in place and they're all functioning properly, I think it's absolutely the best justice system in the world. And I can't think of anything that would be more fair than having a robust prosecution, but at the same time a robust defense, and then the impartial judge in the middle of it saying, keeping tabs on the two sides. And that's, the theatrics that you always see on TV and everything else. I think that's just theatrics. 99% of the time, I can't imagine that any courtroom, with the exception of things like the OJ Simpson trial, that's just not the norm. And so people having confidence in our justice system is critical for us to actually function as a society.
You're right. It is. And, I think I can speak to Tom and the vast majority of anybody who's ever worn a badge and a gun in this country and been given police powers of arrest. I would rather not arrest anybody my whole career than put the wrong person into prison for the rest of their life. And I have had frank discussions with prosecutors. You know what? I don't feel good about this. I don't have enough. I haven't made an arrest because I don't have enough. Or I remember one time specifically when I was in narcotics, and Tom and I, we were so busy. We made so many arrests. I remember one time I got called down years later for a trial on somebody who was missing forever. And it was one of maybe 15 felony arrests we made on one specific night when we were going out 3 to 4 nights a week in Brooklyn. And it was years ago. And I was looking through the arrest paperwork and for the life of me couldn't remember the arrest. Now, that's not uncommon. You might grab 1 or 2 or 3 people at this location and then go to another one. I just didn't remember it. And I told the DA, look, I got to tell you, I'd love to testify on this case. I made the arrest. I did the paperwork. I don't remember it. I don't have my own individual recollections of the event. So do with that what you will. I can testify that I did this paperwork. I can testify that I was there because I did but I don't remember arresting him. I don't remember the events that led up to. I'm sorry, I can't. I have it on paper, but he said, well, can you testify to the paper? Yeah, I'll do whatever you want, but I'm just telling you, I'm going to be very limited and I will not say what I do not independently recall. I will not lie on this. That's not going to happen. And we had a real good talk about it. And he's like, you know what? Okay, we'll offer him some kind of a plea, make it. I said, I'm just being honest with you. I don't want to be in that position. It's not right. And so that's the kind of thing you look for. I'm not tooting my own horn. I'm just being honest with them. It's called integrity. And cops have that far more than the public gives us credit for. We don't want the wrong person put away. No. That does nobody any good. It's all about getting the right person and getting them solid.
Hey, one other thing that I want to hit before we, Tom, I really want to get to that Afghanistan story before we end today. I mean, we got sidetracked, and I apologize for that. But
it's okay.
Before we do, when you think about the OJ Simpson trial, now granted, I mean, things are just different today. I mean, that was, how many years ago was that? It was 94, 95, right?
Almost 30 years ago.
Yeah. Jeez, almost 30 years. Wow. I remember the day that Bronco was going down the freeway, and they basically, I heard on the news yesterday that they said almost 100 million people watched that, that Bronco going down the LA freeway at 40 miles an hour.
Yep.
And it's like, that was so riveting. It's like nothing else was happening other than this OJ Simpson driving down the freeway at 40 miles an hour for 2 hours. Yeah. That was like, I mean, in hindsight, you're kind of like, wow, well, that was a waste of 2 hours. But during that trial, like you said, it seems that the jury had already made up their minds of what they were going to do. And, in respect to how our judicial system works, the prosecution's important, the judge is important, especially an impartial judge. The defense is important, but the jury is critical. And to me, the people that were sitting on that jury, I think they just absolutely failed. And I think that was such a blight on our society as a whole, because to me, 95, I don't think there was near the division and the racism, or at least the claims of racism, that it was brought out in that trial, that it kind of, I don't know, a lot of dominoes fell that day, when he was claimed not guilty. And what, as a detective, when you are interacting with juries, have you ever experienced that? Have you ever seen a jury you're just like, you know what, no matter what I say, these guys have already made up their minds? Or do you think most people actually do what they're supposed to do, and that's listen to the evidence, be impartial and be objective about things, and, issue what they would want for themselves?
Yeah, I think in my experience, I've had good juries, that have listened and, gone, I'm not sitting in the jury room, so I don't know the deliberations going on, but you get like Dan, again, we just keep coming back to experience. And when you look over a jury while you're talking, you kind of get a sense of if they're listening, if they care, if they're paying attention to what's going on. But you can kind of pick out ones that you might have to talk to directly, who are kind of wandering, and others that are writing everything down, their notes. So you can get a sense while you're even sitting in the witness box of who is, who you might have to talk. Like Dan said, you turn your chair. There might be one or two that you have to look right in the eye and tell them what happened, which I've done, Dan has done. But just going to OJ, I think two things I think affected that trial. One, there's a Rodney King hangover still in LA. That was a big thing that even though it was 4 years, 2.5 years later, there was still a Rodney King LAPD hangover when that case came up. And having a celebrity in that position, I think made it worse. And then the other part, I think the juries were finding or looking for that reasonable doubt. Now, whether that happened on day 1 or day 100, as soon as those juries heard what they felt was a reasonable doubt, they tuned the rest of the trial out. They're like, nope, I don't believe that. I'm done. And didn't listen to anything else that happened over the course of that trial, and just had it in their mind. Nope, I don't believe that happened. And that might have been on day 1, and just blew away the rest of the trial.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything that stands out that you think during the Simpson trial that was the trigger that those guys are like, oh, that's my reasonable doubt?
Well, I think the whole theatrics with the glove gave them an opportunity to hang their hats on that, whether they wanted it or not. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit. OJ putting his hand about as open like that as he possibly could into the glove. Everything about it was. It was actually a pretty poor theatrics in many ways, but
Oh, that was a Marcia Clark thing. I look at that and I'm like, okay, first of all, he was wearing white gloves to, that would add, additional space in there. They allowed him to spread his hand, and she should have brought in a brand new glove. So you know what? This is the bloody glove, but blood is going to like shrink it. And anyway, that it's like,
and Johnny Cochran told OJ to stop taking his arthritis medicine. So his hands got swollen.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
and that was intentionally done. His knuckles got swollen from him not taking his medication that he was on for years.
Yeah.
And 2 or 3 days before they had planned on doing that, he told him to stop taking it.
Oh, I'll bet his hands were just swollen like a clumps.
Yep.
Yeah. So you think that was probably the key moment?
It could have been. If you're looking for something to hang your hat on to justify your lack of desire to convict somebody, that would have been a good one. Because you could go back to your friends and family and life and say, see, it couldn't have been him. It wasn't the glove.
Yeah.
Whoever had that glove on killed him, and it didn't fit him.
Right. I mean, early on, like, Jared, you with the DNA part, they had one video early of one crime scene detective, analyst, whoever it was, stepping over the yellow tape without booties on. That was it. Boom. Look, they contaminated he didn't, he had just his sneakers on, and they jumped all over that. They didn't even know who that person was, but look, someone stepped over the crime scene without, their protected booties on their shoes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's contaminated.
It could have been a bunch of things that like you said, Jared, triggered it.
Oh, that's interesting because there was a case in the Boise area that they used our system, our MVAC, to collect DNA from. I think this case is back from like the 60s, or no, not the 60s, probably the 70s. So, approaching 40, 50 years old. And they got DNA from it, and it all matched the suspect and everything. But there's one picture of the detectives are holding up this evidence with their bare hands.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, doesn't matter. We can't use it because the fact that picture exists, the defense is going to bring it out. And then any DNA evidence that we present is going to just get destroyed based on that one picture. So,
Yeah.
thanks for joining us. Your attention today brings us one step closer to exposing and eliminating the evil that brings crime to our communities. Hit subscribe and share this episode. Together, we will bring justice to every victim.